Hey, I'm Dan. Have you ever had to trust someone you didn't know personally? Let me tell you guys a story. This past summer, I went skydiving for the first time ever. And when you go skydiving for the first time, you have to go with an instructor strapped to your back, and he's got the parachute. So I had to trust him with my life when we jumped out of that plane, because if he didn't pull the chute, we were going down. In today's God story, we're gonna look at how a high-ranking officer trusted Jesus to do something super important for someone he cared for. Watch this.
Hey everyone, it's Aaron. It is great to be with you. So Hey everyone, it is Aaron. It is great to be with you. So a very well-known fact about me is I like to just say things, and sometimes I don't actually think about what I'm saying. And that can get me in trouble because there's misunderstandings that happen. Thankfully though, I have a very close group of friends who they give me the benefit of the doubt. They're faithful to me in understanding that sometimes I don't just think about what I'm saying, and I don't want there to be any miscommunication. Faithful. What does that word even mean? What does it mean to you? Does it mean being loyal, being constant, believing in something? What are we talking about here? As we continue this series on Jesus' miracles, we know there is something to be said about being faithful to Jesus. While we can't always explain why some people experience something miraculous and others don't, we do know that God shows love in many different ways. And that's today's big idea. We can experience God's love when we are faithful. When we talk about being faithful to Jesus, what we are actually saying is we believe Jesus said who he said he was, that what he taught was true, and that we can trust him. In my experience, that can be an extremely difficult thing, to be faithful all the time through everything. But that's what we mean when we talk about being faithful to Jesus. Now we know that we can experience God's love in many different ways, and one of them is just being faithful through awkward or often difficult situations. But let's check out the story for today. It's found in Luke 7. So we're picking up in the story where Jesus is performing miracles. He's traveling around all across the land and he's healing people. Now he's not healing them with medicine or with bandages or anything like we're commonly used to. He's healing them with miracles, with God's power. Now miracles are things that might seem impossible for us, but they're very possible through God. So Jesus is traveling around and he's doing all these miracles, he's healing people. He's also teaching about the kingdom of God. And he enters this village called Capernaum. It's a fishing village actually. So in Capernaum, there is a Roman officer who has a very, very sick servant. And he actually cares about this servant and doesn't want the servant to die. So let's read about what happens. We're in Luke 7 here. When the officer heard about Jesus, he sent some respected Jewish elders to ask him to come and heal his slave. So they earnestly begged Jesus to help the man. If anyone deserves your help, he does, they said. For he loves the Jewish people and even built a synagogue for us. Have you ever wanted to talk to someone but have no way to really have an in to talk to them? You kind of would send somebody who might have that relationship. And that's kind of what happens here, is the Roman officer sends somebody to talk to Jesus because he wasn't sure if he'd even get an audience with him. The Roman officer believed if he sent these Jewish respected elders, Jesus would receive that message so much better than if it came directly from him. And the Roman officer seemed like a good dude. I mean, he built the synagogue to unite people because there was a division between the Romans and the Jews, and the synagogue would have helped bridge that connection. So once the Jewish elders came and they spoke to Jesus, he agreed to go with them. Now when they were on their way, they hadn't quite arrived yet, some friends of the officer came and they spoke with Jesus and gave him a message. Here's the message they said to Jesus. Lord, don't trouble yourself by coming to my home, for I am not worthy of such an honor. I am not even worthy to come and meet you. Just say the word from where you are, and my servant will be healed. I know this because I am under the authority of my superior officers, and I have authority over my soldiers. I only need to say go, and they go, or come, and they come. And if I say to my slaves, do this, they do it. We don't know exactly what the Roman officer knew about Jesus, other than what was spread by word of mouth throughout the village. But what a bold statement. The officer knows and trusts that Jesus has the authority to say something at a distance and it will happen. This Roman officer is so faithful to a Jesus he barely knows, but he shows it through his actions and what he asks of Jesus. He believes without a doubt in his mind that Jesus has the authority and the ability to heal his servant. Now when Jesus got this message, he was amazed. He turned to the the crowd and the people around him and he said, "I haven't seen faith like this in all of Israel." Jesus is kind of throwing a little bit of shade here because he's saying that God's chosen people haven't shown as much faith as this Roman officer has. And then, to kind of get a wrap up of the story, all the friends returned to the Roman officer's house and the servant was healed. When we follow Jesus, we have access to this hope through faith that other people might not be familiar with. When things can look tough, when things can be scary, we can hold on to this faith that we know that God is going to show up because he loves us. And he might not show up in ways that we expect or want him to, but we know that God does show up. And that hope is available to everyone, that we can experience God's love when we are faithful. In all kinds of circumstances, through home, through school, wherever you are, you can experience God's love. That's it for this week, everyone. It's great to see you.
The Roman officer believed that Jesus could heal his servant, even when things got really bad. And they all experienced God's love when he did heal him. Let's watch Mark's story. I want to show you how great God is.
Hi, I'm Mark. I'd like to share a story with you that happened right here in this barn. That happened to me when I was about 10 or 11 years old. This is a typical North American barn. It stands probably around 50 feet tall. It's made of wood. It is where we would use to store the hay and straw up in the mow here. And we would stack it. And we would stack it like bricks. And one way and one the other way. And we would stack that up as high as we could to the ceiling. What we would do as kids when the hay was stacked up really high is we would go to the top and we would bury ourselves in like moles and we would just dig around with our heads down, just kind of keep going through in between the bales. And we would play tag, hide and go seek kind of style, and we would be chasing each other and trying to find each other around in there. One day, me and my brother and a friend were climbing up in the mow to play, and it was probably around 30 feet or better that day. And as we were climbing the ladder up, I remember my brother looking down and said, "Make sure we don't get too close to the edge so we don't fall," because there was nothing below us on the floor that day. So as we got up there, we were doing our thing and started digging into the hay and started tunneling through. So I found a direct path and I started scooting along. Then all of a sudden daylight broke out and I'm looking down and I see that wood floor that was so ominous looking at me before. And then I realized I was starting to fall. I went to reach back and there was nothing I could grab onto. And so as I fell, there was nothing to fall onto. And when I just closed my eyes and quickly prayed, dear Jesus, I wanted him to help me and save me. And when I landed really hard and I bounced. And then I sat there, and when I opened my eyes, I realized that I landed on two bales that came down, and they were right underneath me. It was amazing. It blew me away because it didn't make any sense. Those bales shouldn't have been there. It was stripped clean, the floor. And now all of a sudden, there were two bales there, specifically there, to comfort my fall so I wouldn't hurt myself. I truly believe that God answered my prayer. God heard the thoughts that were inside my head. Some days we do things that are irresponsible, things that we shouldn't do. And that day, I shouldn't have put myself in danger, especially when I was warned by my brother. But God saw through that. He saw on the inside of me and saw that I was a little boy who was calling out to him. And that's when he came and he rescued me. Science proves that if two objects fall at the same time, they will hit the floor right at the same time also. That if you took two balls, let's say, a field hockey ball and a tennis ball and dropped them at the same time, they would land on the ground at the same time. There is no way that those 2 bales of hay could have fell down, past me, scooched underneath me. That for sure was God.
Mark believed in God and trusted in him when his life was in danger. He not only experienced God's love, but he also experienced a miracle that changed his life. Let's break into our small groups and see what this looks like in our own lives.